Hey, yo! Nah, these niggas is fucking wildin'. God.
I'm dying. You're not dying.
Okay. Why you shoot him? Why you shoot him?
Stop! He's bleeding out! Size of his head! He's bleeding out of both sides of his head! No, you're not!
Come here, cuz. Come here, cuz. Come here, cuz. Don't worry about it. I got you, cuz. Don't worry about it. Fuck out of here, nigga. I'm with you, boy, nigga. Come here, cuz. Come here, bro.
Police shot my cousin in the head. Police shot my cousin in the head for no reason.
Fuck out of here, man.
He can't breathe. He can't breathe, though. He can't breathe. Pick him up. I'm dying. I'm dying.
Umbrella. She's up. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. So in St. Louis, there was another brother, Anthony Smith, who was shot and killed by the police. And to no surprise, and I don't know how this stuff is still a surprise to any of our people at this point, but to no surprise, this officer was found not guilty and justified for murdering another one of our brothers. And there's always going to be people out there who find a way to justify it, but let's look at what happened to see how this murder was justified.
In 2011, St. Louis police officers Jason Stockley and Brian Bianchi tried to arrest drug suspect Anthony Lamar Smith on a parking lot. Videos newly obtained by the Post-Dispatch made by a business and by a police SUV are shown here, synchronized with previously published video from a bystander's cell phone. Smith's Buick flees, bumping the SUV and brushing Stockley, who fires and misses. A pursuit ends in a crash, and Stockley gets out and fires 4 shots with a pistol, killing Smith. Stockley twice returns to the police vehicle to drop off an unused rifle and to rummage through a duffel bag. After Smith is pulled out of the Buick, Stockley gets into the vehicle. This year, prosecutors charged Stockley with first-degree murder based on undisclosed new evidence. Charges say Stockley was heard saying during the pursuit that he was going to kill Smith. Officials have not accused Stockley of planting the revolver, but, they said, tests disclosed only Stockley's DNA on the weapon.
West Florida, followed in clear 1242. 11. Reach to slow everyone down, subject to custody. Clear 1242. Yeah, got him. Subject is going to be in custody. cooperating at West Florida State Central at 1243. Uprising at 1243.
Jason Stockley was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Mr. Anthony Lamar Smith. A bench trial began August 1st after the defense requested a waiver of a jury trial over my office's objection. Needless to say, I'm disappointed with the court's decision. While officer-involved shootings are very difficult to obtain a guilty verdict, I am confident that we presented sufficient evidence at a trial to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Jason Stockley was guilty of murder in the first degree. But at the end of the day, it was the judge who served as the finder of fact, and in this case, who had the legal duty to determine the outcome of this case. As an officer of the court, I must respect Judge Wilson's decision, but I stand by the evidence we presented in court. I understand the verdict has created frustration and anger for many in our community. I'm frustrated as well. Destruction of our community is not the answer. This is not the time to allow a few in our community to create senseless destruction and cause useless devastation. We cannot let the naysayers and guardians of the status quo let us miss this opportunity to seek real change. I mean, we have to look at the way we have officer-involved shootings are investigated. We need to look at how we move forward. And how we move forward is we have to look at how we have an independent investigation. Right now, the police department investigates themselves. So if we want to have a fair and unbiased investigation, we need to address that investigation so we can pursue justice fairly, regardless of the outcome.
Now, the first thing, when you look at this case, notice every time they describe Anthony Smith, they say the drug suspect in an attempt to criminalize him. Now, the problem for them is that the drug epidemic is going on in their community. I mean, it's in the news every other day. And the more they help these white kids who are drug addicts, the more it contradicts what they say. The more they look like hypocrites for how they treat black suspects. And it comes apparently evident what the difference is. Now, this cop, Jason Stockley, decided to not have a jury trial. He decided to have a bench trial where it's just the judge. And even if he would have had a jury trial, he probably would have still been found not guilty. Because what our people have to realize is that half of the country right now is out fully backing the police and their actions of murdering us. If the energy in this country right now isn't waking our people up, I don't know what will. So it really wouldn't have mattered either way. But he decided to have a bench trial. And Judge Timothy Wilson said that the prosecutors failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Jason Stockley's use of deadly force was not justifiable self-defense. Which is the same old story I feared for my life. They're not even clever to come up with new creative ideas. It's the same thing over and over. Now, in this case, this cop, Jason Stockley, actually said while he was following them that I'm going to kill this motherfucker. But I'm sure Judge Timothy Wilson tried to justify it by saying, well, you know, people say I'm going to kill somebody all the time. Except this dude actually killed somebody after he said, I'm going to kill them. But of course, we get the same old story. But, you know, of course, it's difficult for them to come up with new stories. So he had to say that he feared for his life And the officer, Jason Stockley, said he thought that he heard his partner yell gun and saw the driver's hand on a gun as they rolled past him. So, of course he feared for his life. And he testified he did not draw his service revolver and fire until he saw Smith reaching around inside the vehicle after it was stopped. Now, the thing about this gun that they found, it only has Jason Stockley's DNA, which is kind of crazy in itself because there's no telling what he did with this gun before. And you actually have video evidence showing him going back to go get the gun. But this Judge Timothy Smith, said a fact that is central to the case is whether Smith had the gun when he was shot or not, and that the state's contention that the officer planted the gun is not supported by evidence. I guess they only had DNA and video evidence of him doing it, but, I guess that wasn't enough for this particular judge. And since they found him not guilty, this doesn't even count towards those crime statistics that they love to throw in our faces all the time. So now Officer Jason Stockley doesn't count. George Zimmerman didn't count. Officer Betty Shelby didn't count. Officer Jimenez didn't count. But I'm supposed to take this stat seriously. And we are living in a country, we are living in a nation that thinks this stuff is justified. And I'm not saying all, because nothing is all, but put it this way, there is enough racist people in America that can keep getting racist officials elected over and over and over. We live in a nation where anything we do is criminalized, and the way that they treat us is justified because we're criminals. But then turn around and take that same culture and make money off it. Billions of dollars. Everybody make money off of our culture but us. And then they murder us and point at rap music in Chicago and say it's justified. And I wouldn't say that every cop is bad, but all it takes is that one cop to pull you over, and no matter what you do, right or wrong, God forbid you try to exercise any constitutional amendments or anything, and they can murder you and get away with it. And, my brothers and sisters, can you tell me what about that is different from 1817 to 1917 to 2017? They can always murder you and get away with it. The only difference between 1817 and 2017 is they may or may not go on trial for it. And if 350 years of the same shit haven't woken us up yet, then I don't know how long it's going to take.
I did not murder Anthony Lamar Smith. I did not plant a gun. As I testified at trial, and to homicide on the day of, it was an imminent threat to my life. I had to. The taking of a life is the most significant thing that one can do, and it's not something that is done lightly, and it's not something that should ever be celebrated, and it's just a horrible experience altogether. But sometimes it's necessary. This was a completely reactionary event. If he takes off on carve, we follow. He turns left, we turn left. And unfortunately, you're reacting in those few seconds, and you have to make decisions based on limited information and limited time. And they're the most important decision you ever make because it could be your last. And it's very stressful. And in the end, regardless of what happens, nobody wins. I do not remember stating that we or I are going to kill this motherfucker. I think, don't you know it? The first time that I heard that was when I met with the FBI. And I gave them the same answer that I'm giving you now, which was, I don't recall saying it, but I never denied it. I can tell you with absolute certainty that there was no plan to murder Anthony Smith during a high-speed vehicle pursuit. It's just not the case. And I wish that I could tell you exactly what that was and what it meant, whether it was just heat of the moment or whether it was part of a larger conversation. I really don't. I just don't remember. I thought that Anthony Smith's car at the end at West Forest and Acme had spun a complete 360 degrees, or actually more, to make it in the direction that it was. But when I watched the dash cam, I could see that it was just a 90-degree slide. Again, it's insignificant. It has nothing. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change the decision making. It doesn't change how things are viewed or judged. But it just shows that my memory is not perfect, and neither is anyone else's. What I found to be most surprising, specifically from the cell phone videos that were released after my arrest, was how many officers were near the vehicle while I was searching it for the weapon. I saw everything first person. So, you know, if I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at. And I didn't have that type of view from above where you could actually see who's there, what are they doing. But you can plainly see that there is no attempt to deceive from my actions. The driver's side door is open. The back windows were blown out from the crash. And people were looking in while I was in there. There was definitely no bizarre behavior in my mind at all. Almost every resisting of arrest doesn't have to be a fatal shooting. Every resisting looks bad. They never look good. So what you have to separate are the optics from the facts. And if a person is unwilling to do that, then they've already made up their mind, and the facts just don't matter. And to those people, there's nothing that I can do to change their minds. But any reasonable person who looks at the facts of the case will realize that the optics are nothing but an illusion.
Why is it so important for you to be so open about this?
Because I didn't do anything wrong. If you're telling the truth and you've been wrongfully accused, you should be shouting it from a mountaintop. And which is why I have no problem. And besides the gag order that was put in place, I've never had a problem discussing the facts of this case with anyone that I'm allowed to discuss it with. There's no question that it's off limits in terms of what occurred that day. As far as how I feel right now, I'm obviously currently pleased that there was that the right verdict came down, and it feels like a burden is lifted, but the burden of having to kill someone never really lifts.
Out in front of St. Louis City Police Headquarters, all is quiet right now. Protesters were here earlier making their voices heard, asking for interim police chief Lawrence O'Toole to step down. They have since left. Joining us now is Antoine Johnson. He is the brother of Anthony Lamar Smith. Antoine, thank you very much for a couple minutes of your time, sir.
What's up, man?
I'm sorry for your loss, for your family's loss. Our condolences. Your reaction to the judge's verdict this morning, your thoughts, your emotions today.
Man, the judge ain't do his job. He on the way to retire, so he didn't care less about the case. The whole time the trial was going on, that man was falling asleep at his stand. So he wasn't paying attention to the case. He already had his mind made up of what he wanted to do way before the trial even started and everything. That's why the barricades and stuff up all around downtown, but they supposed to have, we weren't supposed to say nothing about the trial or nothing, but everybody downtown, they already knew the outcome of this.
Antoine, your emotions about your reaction to the demonstrations today in the wake of the verdict, is that the right thing to do? Do you support those efforts? Your thoughts? I talked with your mom briefly on the phone earlier this morning. She was obviously distraught, upset, talking about still finding or trying to find justice for her son. Your thought about the demonstrations ongoing?
Man, we ain't done with this case. That was state. It's goddamn. It's federal. It's Supreme Court. We pushing it up on everything because my brother ain't just go down like that. Stockley committed a murder. He got to be withheld for his actions. All his actions that he did, he got to be held accountable for it. Him, Biaki, he can't plead the fifth next time because it ain't over. We still go push it. If we got to go out of town and go get other lawyers or whatever, we still go push it. We need justice for Anthony Smith.
So you guys intend to take this case further than just this verdict today?
Yes, this case ain't over. It could be my last damn breath. I'm pushing this case. I'm pushing this case regardless. Stockley, him and his family is not finna just sit back and be happy, he got off on a free murder when he said he was gonna murder this man. This man locked me up 8 days before he killed him and was like, oh, where your brothers at? Where your brothers at? Man, come on now. Then 8 days later, you kill him.
Anthony, let me ask you, the protesters today.
Then Biaki, he pleading the fifth. How you pleading the fifth? You an accessory to murder. If me and this man right here was to go kill somebody, and if I kill somebody and he was with me, he'll be charged with it too. But he could plead the fifth and not do nothing.
Anthony, let me ask you, the group today has called to shut various things down, the economies of St. Louis. Do you believe things should be shut down? What should your action be as a community in response to this decision?
Man, we come together, we go shut it down. Shut it down. Ain't no money go get made. Ain't no money go get made. We all just need to come together as people and just knock these other people out the box. The judicial system, they don't care about us. The justice system, they don't care about us. We out here, these laws not made for us.
It's the moment police say they fear and one the community says is becoming too common. 22-year-old Demeek McDonald shot twice by police Tuesday night. He was wanted by state parole.
A series of events have unfolded, but we won't know for certain until we speak with the officers.
Troy police hoping they can rely on what they call a close community relationship to help the ongoing investigation.
When you look at the previous shootings that we've had, especially in light of the mood of the nation, that we haven't had any serious uprisings.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
We feel like we get improper policing. We pay for improper policing.
Know that we love our children more than they love theirs.
Which is why McDonald's uncle, Messiah Cooper, is leading a protest, demanding answers.
And they need to know that this is not a Troy situation. This is a world situation.
Marching from the scene of the shooting to City Hall.
I'll answer their questions and talk to them about what I can disclose at this time.
A lengthy meeting resulting in some kind of understanding.
We have to give them time. I have to be a man of my word. I told him we would give him time.
We're told that Messiah and the mayor will continue to have an ongoing dialogue, not just about the investigation, but also about community relationships. As it comes to the investigation, it remains ongoing and the officers involved are on paid leave.
I am the son of a black woman who still worries about my safety from the bias of privilege and violence that accompanies it. I am a man who understands the pain of unjustified profiling, and I am the first district attorney of color, not only in Dane County, but in the state of Wisconsin. I conclude that this tragic and unfortunate death was the result of a lawful use of deadly police force, and that no charges should be brought against Officer Kinney in the death of Tony Robinson Jr. Recent violence around our nation is giving some in our communities a justification for fear, hatred, and violence. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Violence brings only temporary change. Violence, by creating many more social problems than it solves, never brings permanent peace."
All right, and we back on the forecast. Now, out in St. Louis, after the officer Jason Stockley was found not guilty of killing Anthony Smith, I see some people are still out there protesting. I don't know how long it's going to take to realize that that's simply not going to work. At some point, we're going to have to create our own legacy. Now, I'm all for remembering our ancestors. I'm all for honoring our ancestors. I'm all for celebrating our ancestors. But at some point, we're going to have to create our own lane. When our ancestors protested and marched for us, it was to get us to the position that we are in today. It's up to us to get the future generations into a place where they can have their own, to build their own. If we can't see by now, nobody's going to help us. We have to help ourselves. We are the only ones that is going to empower ourselves. And to me, we have to have short-term goals and long-term goals. Now, the short-term goals, the things that we have to do right now, we have to build our own economy. Now, when we look at our ancestors, they had the blueprint to building successful economies because all the black communities in America were successful. All we hear today is pick yourselves up by your bootstraps. Well, we did, and they came in and burnt the cities down. But we have to look at what they did. They supported each other. They had no choice. It was segregation. White places said, we don't want your money. So what did they do? Spend it with other black people. Segregation forced them to be millionaires. They were forced to build black grocery stores, to build black banks, to build black movie theaters. They had no other choice. Today, we can choose to give our money away if we want, or we can choose to give it to each other and support each other. It's not that black people don't have money collectively. It's that we don't put it in the right directions. And if we wanted to build an economy right now, we could elect a board of successful black business people and put them in charge of strictly growing and funding black businesses. And we can all contribute to that, rich or poor. If you got $1 million you can give that. If you got $1 to give, you can give that. We all can contribute to this fund that grows black businesses, that hires black employees, creates a black economy, and make sure that they're being transparent in everything they do, and whatever they say they're going to do, they actually do it. And if anything looks a little funny, then stop sending your money immediately because it's probably been corrupted. But us putting together this board and us all contributing to it, it would cut down on unemployment. It would cut down the crime rate in the black community because they have jobs. Most of the crime comes from poverty. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. And then we can take control of our local politics, where it's especially major black cities, where we have black city representatives, not just the mayor and the governor. You know, everybody look at the president, but we have to pay attention to the local areas, the people who are in charge of who hires the police commissioner, you know, who decides which laws they're going to enact on the community. We'll be in charge of our local tax dollars. And they've always appointed black leaders. Maybe it's time that we start appointing our own black leaders. And when we're in charge of that, then we'll be in charge of the education fund. Maybe we can decide to put less money into the prison system and more money into the school system. And not only that, but be in charge of the curriculum in the school system. Teach them the truth about history. I think all kids should know the truth about history, but especially black children should know the truth about history. Because if you don't know history, you're going to repeat it over and over and over again. And we can teach our children about being financially stable, about being financially responsible. Teach our children about mutual funds and stocks and bonds when they're really, really young, so they can start off when they're young, so they don't have to keep working over and over and over for the rest of their lives for each generation. We need to find a way to get our children interested in science and math when they're young, and teach them how to become doctors, teach them how to become lawyers. And of course, the doctors and lawyers and teachers that we have today, we need to support them 100% and always have their back if they ever go through anything that is unjustified. And the judges and lawyers that we do have continue to try to make things as fair as possible. But at the end of the day, America was built on racism and would probably die without racism. And the most important thing that we have to learn and we have to do right now is learn how to protect ourselves and protect whatever we do build. We had the black schools. We had the black economy. We had the black cities, and we had the black families. They were all destroyed. We have to learn how to protect ourselves. And we have to learn how to put aside our nationalities, our beliefs, in order to unify. Because on the long-term goal, you will always face the same system until you have a nation that will stop that shit, until you have an army that will back you up. And as black Americans, we have to realize we do have a lot of influence around the world. But we have to go around the world and help our people and let them help us. We have to politic with our people in Haiti and help them and let them help us. And to all of our people all over the world, we have to go there and help them and let them help us. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to politic with our brothers and sisters in Africa and help them and let them help us. We've all been colonized by the same people. We're all in the same position. We've all been extorted by the same people. And I'm not saying if you're black, you got to leave America, leave your home or anything. But if you want equal protection, if you want a difference, if you want a change, then you're going to have to build a nation on your own land with an army that will back you up if something unjustifiable happens to you, especially something that happens over and over and over again. We are going to have to put aside our tribalisms at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, they have put aside their differences in order to put themselves in position over top of you. So we have to put aside our tribalism to be in control of our own destiny, to protect our children. And we can start by putting our differences at the door, leaving our belief systems and all of that at the door, in order to come together to protect ourselves, to protect our children, and to control our own destiny.
There we go.
That's a cop in an undercover car. And here come the riot cops. You're gonna protect the car that just tried to run people over because there's a cop in it? Oh shit. Don't throw shit. Okay, there's been like a water bottle thrown. That's it. There's a water bottle. That's ready.
Y'all have something? Yo, I got a fight in his car. They call us That car just almost hit me. There's a cop in that car.
In St. Louis this weekend, activists say more protests are planned following a second night of demonstrations over the acquittal of a white police officer in the deadly shooting of a black man. As Mola Langhi reports, at least 9 people were arrested last night on charges including resisting and destruction of property.
Demonstrators clashed with police during a second night of violent protests in St. Louis Saturday. Earlier in the day, a large group took over an upscale suburban mall, forcing stores to briefly close their doors.
White silence is violence.
The demonstrations come one day after a judge cleared Jason Stockley, a white police officer, in the 2011 death of 24-year-old Anthony Lamar Smith. Prosecutors argued that Stockley planted a gun inside Smith's car after shooting him 5 times, but the judge said there was no proof. People were enraged and flooded the streets after the decision was announced Friday. Protests quickly escalated into violent confrontations with police. The mayor's home was covered in red paint and windows were broken.
The unruly crowd became a mob. This mob was intent on destroying or damaging property, assaulting police officers, and setting fires.
Saturday afternoon, Governor Eric Greitens asked people to remain calm.
Violence and vandalism is not protest, it is a crime.
Police arrested at least 33 people. Stockley has since left the force and now lives in Texas.
It feels like a burden is lifted, but the burden of having to kill someone never really lifts.
And the wounds are still raw for so many people who are demanding justice.
Y'all don't feel great. I'm saying, I'm see that man. I'm coming to touch man. I know every last one of my rights. I know every last one of my rights. Tell me one thing I did wrong. Tell me one thing I. Come on, man. Hey, you see this word? Hey, bro. Hey, come on, bro. Chill. Baby, you are a witness now. Did we do anything wrong? Because we didn't shut up, baby. Because we didn't shut up, baby. Baby, no. Baby, no. Did you see that, though? Because we didn't shut up and be good little niggas. Officer, can you put my wallet in my pocket, please? Yeah. Come on. Because we didn't shut up and be good. Can you get my wife? She's right there. Where do we get it? Yeah.
Remember the shocking video of 2 teens duking it out with a pair of Detroit cops? Tonight, a huge development in the case. It's footage you saw only right here on The Edge. 2 brothers facing prison time for a fight they say was started by those officers. But tonight, the brothers are getting a big break from the prosecutor. Here's Fox 2's Andre Isom with an update.
Remember this video of the fast food fisticuffs? It all went down in the month of May at this East Side eatery. Once we aired it on The Edge, this brawl became big news. Many people could not believe what they saw or heard either. On one side, 2 of DPD's boys in blue, and their opponents, 2 college-educated brothers who just stopped by to grab a midnight snack for their mother, when all of a sudden, the cops came in.
I thought they initially came in and profiled us.
They asked the guys for ID, and both young men vigorously questioned the officers' actions. Then, there was this. After an investigation, the Detroit Police Department deemed this use of force appropriate and reasonable. So, law enforcement was off the hook. However, some serious charges were levied against the lads. Felonies.
Assault and battery on a police officer, resisted arrest, and obstruction of justice. I was very scared and nervous. I didn't know what was going to happen. I could have just walked away from the situation. I wouldn't have been going through any of this.
But 1 week and 2 days after this story ran on Fox 2, new information came down from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. The charges have been dropped against 26-year-old Navon Moore and his brother, 20-year-old Taiwan Mitchell.
I was about to cry. I got a little bit emotional because this is my life.
I'm very elated, but I'm concerned about other young people out in the community who face these things every day, who are not as maybe articulate as Tawan, who do not have the kind of legal support that he has. I'm concerned about them, and those are the people that we're going to continue to fight for.
Justice is going to get served, whether it's on the people or it's on the police, and I think justice was served today.
For Taiwan, this nightmare may be over, but he is glad it is something he'll never forget. Taiwan is approaching his junior year at Madonna University. His major, criminal justice.
I want to work with the federal government, and if I can't work with the federal government, I want to work with the youth in the city of Detroit, so I can help them out. Now, with situations like this is another thing that I want to help them out with. I want to help them to get into school and better themselves.
And already, he has learned some valuable lessons he will surely share with them all.
Just walk away. Know the value of myself. Just walk away from it. It's not worth it. Going to jail, messing up my career. I have a lot going for myself, and I want to continue to move forward in my future.
We asked what he would say to the two officers if ever given the chance.
I wouldn't say anything to them. I forgive them. I don't hold any grudges for them. I just hope that they learn their lesson and just go on with their jobs, do their jobs the correct way.
This case sets a precedent. It sets a precedent for two young men who are like the brightest and the best that Detroit has to offer. And if they can be encroached upon, anybody can.
Taiwan was able to break the news to his brother, who's in law school in Texas right now, that the charges have been dropped. Both men think that video should be an example to police and the public of what not to do, though they are not saying that you should not defend yourself if put in a particular situation. But knowing when to walk away is also a true sign of a man.
To the president's chagrin, demonstrations continued. In 1965, protests targeted Selma, Alabama, the seat of Dallas County, where fewer than 1% of eligible blacks were registered to vote. And where bully boy segregationist Sheriff Jim Clark and his deputized citizens posse rounded up civil rights activists using Gestapo tactics and cattle prods. SNCC's John Lewis was among more than 2,000 demonstrators jailed in the first months of 1965. The Reverend C.T. Vivian, an organizer for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, led the Selma campaign.
We're willing to be beaten for democracy, and you misuse democracy in the street. You beat people bloody in order that they will not have the privilege to vote. You beat me in the side and then hide your blows. Well, go on. No, I don't need to leave. We have come to register to vote. And you must realize that this is a national issue. It's not a Selma issue. It's not an Alabama issue. This is a national issue. Whenever anyone does not have the right to vote, then every man is hurt. I don't need to leave. We have come to register.
On the night of February 18th, state troopers savagely attacked Vivian and other demonstrators. In the chaos, a young man named Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot at point-blank range in what the local newspaper called a nightmare of state police stupidity.
He was murdered by the irresponsibility of every politician from governors on down who has fed his constituents the stale bread of hatred and the spoiled meat of racism.
The tragedy galvanized the Selma voting rights campaign. SCLC's James Bevel proposed a symbolic march from Selma to the Alabama state capitol in Montgomery, more than 50 miles away. On March March 7, 1965, SNCC's John Lewis and the SCLC's Hosea Williams led a procession of more than 500 marchers over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Alabama state troopers, clad in gas masks and riot gear, waited on the other side.
It'll be detrimental to your safety to continue this march, and I'm saying that this is an unlawful assembly. You are ordered to disperse, go home, or go to your church. This march will not continue.
News cameras immortalized a hellish scene of police brutality and chaos. Images of Bloody Sunday shocked the nation. Time magazine reported that rarely in human history has public opinion reacted so spontaneously and with such fury.
All right, and we back on the forecast. And, I want to say rest in peace to the brother Anthony Smith. And this shouldn't be a surprise to any one of our people at this point that this cop was found not guilty. And it's going to continue to be the same old song until we stop protesting and start playing our part and filling our lane and leaving our legacy for the next generation. We can't live off what our ancestors did. We have to create our own lane. We have to focus on the short-term goals, and we have to complete the long-term goals. And we don't have any more excuses or reasons not to put our beliefs to the side, to come together and build our nation, and most importantly, to protect it. Because believe me, there will always be somebody coming trying to destroy it and take it away from you. So, as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're going to keep falling for anything.